The sleep hijackers. So when it comes to this stuff, like I would say there's a number of things. I think a lot of people are aware from a caffeine standpoint. The half-life of caffeine is 6 hours and the quarter life is 12 hours. So that means if you drink caffeine at noon, you still have a quarter of it in your body at midnight when you're sleeping. And so, caffeine can have a dramatic effect on robbing your REM sleep. So I think a lot of times when people have issues with falling asleep, they have insomnia, this can be like first and foremost something to really start to pay attention to is like not having caffeine maybe after 10 in the morning to see if it starts to help with sleep. Good old weed, always laugh about this because, Joe Rogan did a few podcasts with Matthew Walker and he must have asked Matt about 17 times, like, are you sure weed isn't good for my sleep? And the one thing they found with weed is that it tends to help people fall asleep quicker, just like alcohol, but it tends to rob people of about 20% of their REM sleep. So that is huge. So yeah, although you're falling asleep quicker, that doesn't mean that the quality of your sleep architecture over the course of the 8 hours is that of someone that didn't smoke. So that's really important. When it came to CBD, I think there's just not enough studies to tell. So it's something where, I've talked to a few doctors about it. They said, at this point, there's not a ton of negative research. So it's kind of one of those things where I guess we never know. But, if it's something where people have success with, the known negative side effects like alcohol, weed, and caffeine are not there currently. But, I would say do your own research. And then alcohol, one of the worst things about alcohol is that it raises body temperature. So, for most of us, we need to drop our body temperature by 2 to 3 degrees to help our bodies kind of fall asleep. And this is one of the issues with booze, especially people that drink to help themselves fall asleep. One, it basically prevents people from getting as good a REM sleep. But you look at all the studies, a lot of people are, although they fall asleep quickly compared to someone that has maybe insomnia, it's like, yeah, I understand why people use it, but the actual data says that it's probably not in your best interest. Screen time before bed. Matthew Walker did a 3 podcast series on Dr. Peter Attia's podcast. It was really interesting, all the different studies that I kind of went and looked up relative to this, but just people being put, in places where there was no technology or basically out in the woods or cabins where, people didn't have access to all the technology and, how crazy it was as far as, oftentimes blue light can like hijack our melatonin and basically dump it later on in the night, which makes it harder for us to fall asleep. And then our level of sleepiness isn't there. So screen time can be one of the most dramatic things, especially for kids nowadays. And I think the majority of kids are sleeping an hour or two less a day than they used to. And, one of the biggest things, especially teenagers, college kids, is, people waking up. Like the studies are crazy how like just basically people have anxiety first thing in the morning, or they're waking up throughout the night, they're checking their DMs or their texts because they're afraid they're going to miss out. And all these things have a dramatic impact on our sleep. So for us to be aware of that and do what we can, if we're ready to take those steps, I think it's really important.